Flowers of blue, Damascus gray. Tears of sorrow for the joy he had to trade. Band of brothers sing a song for the parade. Sons and daughters don't know the masquerade.
Virgil, Jack, how are you doing?
Real good.
Hey, doing
Real good
great.
considering.
Excited.
Yeah, I'm just in my bomb shelter. Go ahead.
Well, there's a lot to discuss. People are kind of freaking out, and it seems like every day there's a new narrative that is being pushed upon us. Depending on where you get your sources, you either are reading that World War III has already started. Someone like David Icke would be saying that right now. But there are also very interesting articles kind of laying out, that have come out today, actually, kind of laying out how this is really not going anywhere and could probably be less detrimental than last year's Syrian conflict even was. And I thought it'd be interesting to, kind of go over some of these facts that have been accumulated by other sources. And just, I've read some of them myself. You guys might have read some of yourself, but they're worth kind of going into. So one of the most shocking things for me in my research on this was realizing that articles predicting a false flag attack soon have been dating back several months, both by the Russian government have been reporting on this, as well as Assad himself. Here's one example, and I'm reading a Russia Insider article right here. February 2018, the Syrian Arab Army has been making quick, decisive gains on the ground in recent weeks. Eastern Ghouta has all but fallen. Barring foreign intervention, the Syrian government's victory is now all but assured. Fast forward to March 13th. Russian military command claims U.S. is aiming to strike Damascus on an invented pretext, advising them against it. Also March 13th, Syrian forces reported finding caches of chemical weapons in labs around liberated areas of Ghouta. March 19th, Russian and Syria military figures reported they feared the rebels would stage a false flag chemical attack in order to drag U.S. NATO into action in Syria. March 30th, Donald Trump told a crowd at a speech in Ohio, and later repeated in a tweet, that the U.S. would be pulling out of Syria very soon. This is met with consternation in the capital and across the media. Linking to an interesting article there as well. April 6th, and now we're just about a week ago, the United Nations meeting convened at Russian request to discuss the alleged attack in Salisbury, United Kingdom. Every member of the United Nations who spoke was categorical in their condemnation of any use of chemical weapons. And fast forward to just a couple of days ago, the chemical attack was reported initially by the White Helmets, who are a U.S.-UK funded group, and the U.S. and all of their allies came out immediately, condemning and blaming the Syrian government and holding Russia responsible. So that's kind of a brief, weird build-up to today. That it's, it almost seems more choreographed than it was last year. It could just be that it wasn't, kind of fell into the dark news after a week or so, kind of like Vegas, so forth. I guess I'm wondering if you guys think is it different this time? Logistically, the past few days, I've seriously been blackpilling not only myself but people I speak with about it. This seems like World War III. In a little while, I'll read some other excerpts that might say otherwise, but right now, I mean, what are the facts saying?
I think it's hard to say that it's truly World War III, but it does the desire to remove Assad seems more determined by Western governments than it did a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that Donald Trump's tweets, very disappointing tweets from him, calling Assad animal Assad.
Yeah, I have them right here actually. Let me read them real quick. Russia. This was yesterday. Russia vows to shoot down any and all missiles fired at Syria. Get ready, Russia, because we are coming. Nice and new and smart. You shouldn't be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. Also yesterday he tweeted, "Our relationship with Russia is worse now than it ever has been, and that includes the Cold War. There's no reason for this. Russia needs to help with their economy, something that will be very easy to do, and we need all nations to work together. Stop the arms race." And it goes on from there. Contrast that to what he was saying when Obama was president and dealing with similar, political figures trying to coerce him into a Middle Eastern conflict in Syria. August 29th, 2013. What will we get from bombing Syria besides more debt and possibly a long-term conflict? Obama needs congressional approval.
Well, I think President Trump is just like President Clinton and President Bush.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's really, really hard to be president and get anything done.
Right.
If you read Donald Trump's tweets regularly, it's like he's actually not the president.
Not only is it like it's like he's not actually the president, but I go back and forth between being really like impressed, almost in a kind of collegiate, almost like bro manner, manospheric way, where like when he tweets and he's kind of a badass, right? And it's like cool that we have a president who would be willing to phrase things certain ways. But other times it's like he's a complete knucklehead, goofball, idiot, basically. And things like, trying to provoke Russia, quoting the word smart. Like all these little, like he's playing a game in second grade or something.
Right. Yeah, he's like the class bully.
Yeah.
It's very strange. But I think he's obviously expressing in his weird, like, juvenile way that he can't get anything done. He can't do anything he wants to do. And the reality is all the president gets to do is assent to whatever the military-industrial complex desires. And in this case, for the last several years, they've wanted to overthrow Assad. And for whatever reason, chaos, Israel, resources, fun, whatever it is that they want. All the president can really do is say, yeah, let's go. Just like, as I said, like Bill Clinton in Kosovo. Like, finally I get to do something. I get to be like a leader, and so I'm going to bomb and destroy Yugoslavia.
Right, as a show of strength.
As a show of strength. And, it's just a moment where a president finally gets to do something he wants to do. And I think Trump's feeling that. And he's, for whatever reason, surrounded himself with Jews and Jew lovers. And that's what they want. And he's agreeing to it.
Do you think that's what he wants? I think inherently,
I think day to day
he wants.
Sometimes he wants Stormy Daniels. Sometimes he wants, it changes. What he wants day to day changes.
Yeah.
But Virgil, I think there was some consistency leading up to his candidacy and then the beginning of his presidency.
Sure.
Where it seemed like there was a direction, and the fact that this is so counter to that. No, your analysis of just him saying, "Oh, I want to do something, be a leader," that is actually interesting. I hadn't thought of that, and that does make sense. Are there any? Just anything, conspiracy theory or not, to explain this type of a 180?
I just think honestly, I just think it's that he's got this Russia investigation. His lawyer just got, invaded. He feels powerless, and this is one way that he gets to be president. He wanted to be president, and this is it. This is really all you've got when you're president, as it turns out. You don't actually get to make any decisions. You don't get to do anything you want. You don't get to direct any domestic policy because the establishment is so entrenched. If you look at the so-called omnibus bill, in terms of what things that Donald Trump ran on, 0 things were provided in that. So I'm sure it's frustrating. I would be frustrated. Like, okay, finally I get to actually, like, if you're a leader of anything, finally you get to do something you want, and the only area is foreign policy for a president. If you look at the Constitution by design limited the president to almost nothing. And if we were really following the Constitution, when we elected a president, it would just be, we'd be electing no one. We would universally we would go, this person doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the president is constitutionally, except in areas of foreign policy. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're always at war, because these guys want to do something. And there's an entire fully funded military-industrial complex at his disposal, and he gets to do something. And, he doesn't read, so he doesn't look into the actual evidence of whether someone like Assad would logically gas his own people. So there we are. And now he's hired a sociopathic criminal like Bolton to direct national security. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think it's World War III, because honestly, I think the leader of the free world is Vladimir Putin, and I don't think Putin is going to try to trigger World War III. That's my hope.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think so either. The past few days, today as an exception, Trump has been, his rhetoric has been so aggressive that it seemed like he was going to be willing and capable of doing something that Putin would be forced to retaliate against. because he did say many times, and high up people within the Kremlin said many times, that there would be a retaliation in commensurate with the offense if it was directed towards Russians, if Russian lives were lost. And it seemed like the escalation seemed such that that was actually going to be the case. But Trump appears to be backing off. People, warmongering people like Mattis and Bolton appear to be somewhat backing off, or at least blinking, an eye in the Mexican standoff that's occurring. Russia, I think, is calling their bluff in a sense. And
Yeah, that's how
that's a good thing, and I think what it's led to is a pretty small % chance that this is actually going to escalate, similar to last year. It's just the kind of thing that they get everyone worked up, almost as like a test or something, a test run to see how an initial reaction would be. Because I think at some point this will happen, and there is certainly a part of me that the small part of me that is an accelerationist, like Evola kind of called for later in life, and it seemed like Guénon was calling for as well. I mean, I realize there are different sort of types of accelerationism, but the one that would welcome a World War III in the sense that our society has gone so far down the hill of everything that is virtuous in life that we must somehow, to return back to that golden age, we need to go off the deep end, so to speak. So again, I think at some point it will happen, but this doesn't appear to be the straw that will break it.
I hope that's true.
You hope that this is not the straw?
Right. I do think that that there will be some kind of retaliation. I just hope
on the part of the United States.
Yeah, I think there'll be some kind of thing will happen on the part of the U.S. and France and the U.K. Because they're not going to give in on their narrative that Russia is evil incarnate.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was very fearful that something would have happened in the last 24 hours. The fact that it didn't leads me to conclude that that they're truly concerned about Russia's retaliation.
Right.
And that there's going to be something, something similar to last year, and that Russia hopefully won't, escalate the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a best case scenario. I think Trump has sort of painted himself into a corner in terms of a response.
Mm-hmm.
And which, that just makes me think that something will be done, and hopefully it will just be small, like last year's attack.
I think that
it's not small. If it was my family being killed, it wouldn't be small.
Sure, it's simply going to be a symbolic attack for the weird, demographic in America that really the majority of people, at least that's the way it appears, it's being portrayed through the media. The majority of people are just like, yeah, absolutely bomb them. We don't need proof whatsoever. The only one, to his great credit, who's taking a different stance and a quite antithetical stance is obviously Tucker Carlson, who's had some great interviews and clips and things. But somehow those people all need to be appeased, and then people within the government who want this type of thing to happen need to be appeased. So yeah, I think there'll be, similar to last year, there will be a strike of some kind, and Russia will be notified ahead of time, and Russia will notify, Assad when it is, if it's, relevant to him. I don't think the strike that Trump sent last year, I'm not sure, the casualties were probably somewhat negligible. I don't really remember what happened, but I did just read a kind of recounting of that situation, and that is exactly what happened. Putin was able to tell Assad, here's where they're going to strike, and so on and so forth. And I did also read that all of us, the Syrian Arab military's Air Force planes have all been taken to Russian Air Force bases. So there's no chance of an attack there. Yeah. It's not even really worth dissecting the notion of Assad being blamed for this. Obviously we don't need to even humor the idea that he did. I guess what is interesting though is why does Israel want not only an American presence in Syria so badly, but also why are they so opposed to Syria? I realize that Assad is not in any way pro-Israel, and they're also very close neighbors. Does Israel want that land? I mean, let's just talk geopolitics for a moment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Israel is playing a long game.
Yeah, and they've got a bunch of
they want all of the Middle East.
Insane, low IQ, sand monkeys around them that they're willing to arm to take out the only Christian nation in the area. I mean, what's the idea behind that? Why? I mean, this kind of goes into a broader question about the self-deprecating way in which Jews enact their geopolitics in their globalist policies, in that they're surrounding themselves with their own enemies when they bring hordes of immigrants into Western countries. Western countries are the only countries, the only powerful countries that are pro-Jew. And yet the Jew aims to displace us. I mean, they're digging their own grave in that sense. But back to the original question, why get rid of Assad and arm ISIS in the process? And clearly, whether it was Israel or the United States, somewhat one and the same, who actually did this chemical attack and then blamed it on Assad's regime. Why do that? Why are they so set on taking Assad out?
Well, because Assad is one of the few leaders of the world that is woke in terms of geopolitics and knows that the U.S. and Israel and the Western allies are on the wrong track, so that therefore he has to be taken out. As I said, they're playing a long game. They don't care how long it takes in terms of creating their own living space.
Right.
And that's why they, one of the consequences of provoking all of this is that it creates, refugees that will eventually land in European countries. You could say that, well, that doesn't necessarily help Jews because all these people are anti-Semitic, but they don't necessarily, just because they think it's in their interest doesn't mean it actually is in their interest
Also, I mean, Israel seems small now, but if you're right, and their long-term goals are to establish a greater Israel, including the surrounding territory, it's not going to matter at a certain point. When America is 80% Negro, the Jews will leave, and they'll go back to their ethno homeland that is now encompassing, 500% more territory.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's what they see as the long term consequence of getting rid of all of these one by one, creating chaos and getting rid of all of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Syria is the next domino. Once that's done, they'll go to Iran, and so on. Any Middle Eastern country that they want, they'll figure out a way to, create figurative monsters. Assad is the new monster. Saddam, in early 2000, Saddam Hussein became a monster. He was a U.S.-Israeli ally in the 80s, and then he became Adolf Hitler in the early 2000s. It's the same with Assad.
It's interesting that they're being able, I guess not as successfully, but they're still able to paint this Christian man with a family and
Well, Assad's not Christian, but he is a protector of Christians.
Oh, I see. I didn't realize that.
Assad belongs to a group of heretical Muslims called Alawites. It's a very strange history as to how the Assad family became leaders in Syria, but they're not Christians, and they're weird kind of heretical Muslims.
Okay.
But and that makes him in some ways interesting.
That is interesting. I mean, I had never read that. My only really information on Assad has really pertained to these two attacks. I kind of knew of him, but wasn't really so interested prior to this, prior to last April. But when you read about him in the context of us bombing him, and you're kind of trying to seek out factual information on the matter, you kind of read him in the context of being kind of this Christian. At least
He's
that's been my experience. Yeah.
He's definitely a protector of the Christians, but he belongs to a very curious sect that sort of broke off from Islam.
I see.
And that's one of the reasons he was, his family way back was installed kind of as the leader of Syria, because they were the only group that could be worked with,
mm-hmm.
because they weren't so sectarian.
Right.
And the fundamentalist Muslims don't like the sect that he belongs to. But I think it seems to me that the majority of Syrians actually do like him.
Uh-huh. And I see. So it really doesn't have anything to do with his religious beliefs for the Jewish people, for Israel to so vehemently want him out of the region.
No, it's not his religious beliefs. It's the fact that he opposes the Zionist regime.
Does it have anything to do with the fact that he is a protector of Christianity?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that. I don't know for sure. Obviously, Jews intrinsically hate Christianity, but in terms of Assad, I think it's simply that he opposes the neoliberalist Zionist Western regime.
Right. Similar to Russia, Iran.
And Hungary, you can
Hungary, sure, yeah.
if you've seen the Jewish press since Orban was reelected, it's the same thing. It's
Yeah, I mean,
this is it's a terrible trend. This anti-democratic trend, even though he was completely elected democratically.
I'm actually surprised that Hungary hasn't yet been painted so clearly by the left as the literal reincarnation of Nazi Germany.
Now I think it's coming.
It definitely is coming, because that's how cool what Hungary's doing is. Not quite, but Orban is seriously woke on a very large swath of questions.
Right, but he's talented in the sense that he doesn't, he doesn't speak plainly on the JQ.
Right. Yeah, we kind of discussed this the other day. That's the difference. That's why he couldn't. Someone like Tucker Carlson will talk about Viktor Orban's immigration policies and quote him, and even have whatever clips of his speeches and things, and he can do that. And that's in part because he hasn't named the Jew. And that's something that the alt-right can't have. They can't have what appears to be a very sympathetic news host, meaning it seems like he would be, all things considered, all things being equal, very sympathetic to the alt-right movement if he could be, but he can't, because we've named the Jew. And Fox News is what is that? The CEO's name? He's a Jew, whoever he is. Can't remember his name.
Koch.
Is it Koch? I'm thinking of the guy who had that sex scandal.
No, the Koch brothers, I think, are the Fox News owners. You're thinking of Weinstein?
No, not Weinstein. Rupert Murdoch.
Oh, yeah, you're right. No, actually, you're right. It's Murdoch is yeah.
Yeah. Huge Jew.
What happened to Jack?
Hey, just listening.
What do you think, Jack?
Are you going to say anything?
I have nothing to add. I'm just sitting back, sipping my vodka and learning.
Have you guys been
talk about a Russian bot?
Right. That's
I'm gathering information to dox you later.
Look, right-wing Americans drink bourbon. We're not concerned about our health, all right?
I drank bourbon all day at work, okay? I'm going to switch things up.
All right.
So I will one question that I did have for the group at large. If
the tribe?
If this no, I don't use that word. If this kind of dies down and the rebels are defeated as it appears they're going to be, will it just be, will Syria stop being kind of a fulcrum for this activity and they'll move on to a different country, or is this going to be continued conflict in Syria indefinitely?
I think so long as Assad is in charge, that Israel will never give up.
They'll be arming rebels or whoever and terrorist groups, etc.
Wow. They're gonna go after Assad like the U.S. government went after Osho in the 1980s.
That's right. I'm anti-Jew, but you have to tip your hat to their tenacity in terms of subverting Western countries and overthrowing any leader that they believe is in their way.
Yep, they're impressively crafty. The fact that the omnibus bill included $1.3 billion for the construction of a border around Israel I'd love to see some of their builds and how
Yeah.
they benefit us.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any. Is there any Are there any Gibbs for us?
Right.
The Israeli budget.
For us Goyim and Shitzkas.
There's probably some money in the Hollywood bill.
Right. Yeah, the Hollywood and media.
so that the Weinsteins can have their shishkas.
The Coen brothers. Obviously, they make good movies.
Actually, make the Coen brother. That makes me sad. Actually,
It does. The reason I use that as an example is because it's such a Jewish name.
no, it's such a Jew, and I, before I was Jew woke, I loved their movies so much.
Right.
And then when you think about them now, you realize I've just been duped.
Yeah, it's interesting because objectively, it's good material. In the same way that objectively, Bob Dylan was an amazing songwriter, but
Yeah.
I can't listen to him anymore.
I know.
It's-
I was I heard his Leonard Cohen song accidentally the other day, and I had the same feeling. Like, I used to think he was a great songwriter, and now I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it really, being woke makes so many luxuries of life just completely irreproachable, and you can't engage in anything without realizing that it's having some negative impact on your greater Aryan soul.
I know. It's sad.
Whether it be television or music, or it's very limited. It's sad, but on the other hand, there are expressions that are acceptable, such as classical music, for instance. I mean, that's something you can. There's no guilt in listening to classical music. Guilt's not the right word, actually, because the guilt is one of the plagues of the Western man. So
Right.
Shouldn't use it so loosely.
No, there's only pride with classical music.
Right. With
There are
classical,
way too many notes. Classical music. That's actually been proven scientific.
right. There was a limit, and they passed it.
Yeah, Mozart actually passed it.
So
It's not for me to say.
So I think that this has de-escalated enough to where we can say with some sincerity that a war will not come from this conflict. This one, at least.
I really hope that's true. And honestly, at the end of the day, again, I'm completely relying on
Russia.
the leader of the free world, Vladimir Putin. We have to praise and tip our hat and say thank God for Vladimir Putin, because if Russia had a leader that was unhinged, I mean, this would be entirely different.
Right. It's a very good point. I'm looking at a photo of him right now, actually, and he's incredibly stoic.
Does he have his shirt on?
It's one of the few, actually, that he does. He's standing in the snow, though.
It's one of the few you have of him with his shirt on.
It's one of the few times I've looked at him and my shirt's been on.
I actually refuse to look at a photo of Putin with his shirt on. That's my own preference. I'm not obliging anyone else to follow, but
You do like a 5-minute morning and night routine where you look at
yeah, especially days like this.
Right. I think this podcast should become just overtly pro-Russian. Basically, just kind of like an apparatus of Russia Insider. You could kind of partner up with them.
Ride the Tiger Russia Insider.
Well, I do have something to note, though, on this. Aside from how far it's going to escalate, Donald Trump has done it again, in the sense that any credit that he's built up over the past year has again been completely demolished. And not only that, he appears to have made a mockery of himself on the geopolitical level.
Yeah.
In the sense that he's reacted like a baby. I mean, all of the world, hardly any of the world leaders have, aside from Russia, Putin, Assad, possibly the Iranian, what's his name? I'm not really sure. I haven't followed.
Khomeini, I can't keep them straight.
Nevertheless, Trump has had the most immature and irrational, somewhat womanly reaction to this entire thing, like he's on his period or something. Just name calling. I mean, where is the Trump of the campaign, and can Trump recover from this stylistically with the alt-right, with his base at large, and where does he go from here? Honestly, it's this kind of behavior brings me second thoughts on whether or not he can win re-election.
That's an excellent point. It's hard for me to know, because I don't feel like I'm connected to the Trumpian base at all. So it's very hard for me to know what their point of view is. Although I've seen, people like Bill Mitchell.
Oh yeah.
The diehard Trumpians think that whatever he wants to do is right. But I don't know how many people like that are really out there. I know that I just truly believe that the rank and file, so-called conservative American doesn't want more warfare within the Middle East. And, we were duped, or they were duped, if you will, in 2003 with the Iraq War and the weapons of mass destruction. And no one wants to go back there. No one wants to spend that money. No one wants to attempt to assimilate third world Middle Easterners into our country and into Western countries.
Who's no one when you say this? Because it seems like that's what everyone wants. It seems like America's learned nothing, and that the media, at least, are reacting both left and on the right in ways that's like repeating not only past mistakes, but we're continuing to attempt to have this globalist, interventionist, babysitter mindset where we spread this faux democracy throughout lands of low IQ, inbred sand Negroes. I mean, it's been tried and failed, and we simply can't continue. But it seems as though we've forgotten this.
Are you finished?
Okay,
no,
sorry.
I agree. I think that's an elite media point of view. I'm referring to like just normie Trump supporting Americans.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that they want any more Middle Eastern wars. I'm not saying they don't want warfare. They want civil war. They want revolutionary war. They would be happy with, if we were actually like all fighting against Mexico. But they don't want these weird Middle Eastern wars where no one really gets to fight. We're killing people with drones, that kind of stuff.
With gas.
I don't think that the Trump's base really wants this.
I will say I don't do this very often, but I had some contact with normies over the past few days.
What?
Yeah, no, it wasn't good. I left the house. I got off Twitter, spoke to people, and so this is purely anecdotal.
Wait a minute. How often have we talked about this?
This is why I was hesitant to bring it up.
All right.
But there's the comment that I've gotten is just so Syria, and it's just it's crazy, but they chemically bombed them, so what are you gonna do?
Wow.
It's just it's literally shocking coming from our perspective where you're seeing things through a certain filter. Talking to someone who is just vaguely following things on the news, they're like, we have to go do that. So I would actually counter signal John and say I don't know that this is going to. If I was a betting man, which
counter
I am,
me. You do that every opportunity you have.
I'm not going to counter signal Virgil. I don't have a death wish. So, I don't think this will negatively affect. I don't think it'll affect his chances of re-election. I don't think that normies think about things that deeply.
Well,
and
nice.
Hold on a second.
That's interesting.
That's interesting. I disagree with this. No,
you don't. Look, John, you don't interact with any normies.
That's actually not true. I live with I don't know, 2.5.
Don't you call your mother a normie?
2.5. You talking about the half basement you live in?
Yeah, that's really funny. No, I'm talking about my friend who is the reason I can't record these podcasts at my own house.
Is he a half or a whole?
He's the half, and my two other roommates, give or take, are a whole and another half or so. But regardless, I had a comment on what you had said, and you guys have derailed me at this point. Normies don't care. Yeah, that's true. That's actually something interesting to get into in and of itself. The fact that during these incredible sort of suspenseful periods of crisis where the whole almost world is wondering whether or not World War III is looming down upon them, the alt-right is literally the most peaceful and anti-war spreading movement that you could imagine.
Hang on a second. You're saying the whole world thinks World War III is looming down upon them?
Well, I use that as a figure of speech, but yeah.
I don't. I mean, maybe globally, but from what I can tell, like nationally, I feel like this has barely been a blip on the radar.
Interesting. You might be right, and it could be that the people you're talking to just aren't following the news. But a
lot of that is from Twitter as well. It's not
right.
Just from human interaction.
There's hardly been any It's certainly Twitter. It's like this whole Syrian thing is not even an issue.
You're right.
Right, and that's probably the best gauge we have on news, I would think.
I mean, I guess what's going on is that of the three of us, have been reading the most of these articles, outlining details and also talking about details and logistics of warheads coming into place, and troops are gathering and moving positions, and you see things like screenshots of planes being grounded and not no fly zones and things like that. There are various things going on a global scale involving the countries that are currently involved, that you're kind of questioning what's going on here and how big is this going to get. And it could be that people that you've been talking to, who obviously are, well, I mean, I guess either listening to the left or the right, with the exception of Carlson, saying, well, yeah, I mean, they've been gassed. There's nothing. What else are you going to do? We have to bomb them, because that's the unanimous and grossly overrepresented response by every single outlet imaginable. Those people don't care. They want something to happen. But does Trump's, and the reason I'm I'm pushing back on what you said is because you said normies don't care, but you're talking about normies who probably didn't vote for Trump, so I don't think it would have an impact on his reelection.
I think you're being too optimistic if you think that, say, whatever 40% of the population or the voting population voted for Trump. I would say 1 in 10 generously follow closely enough to actually think about like foreign policy and things like that. I mean, they're hearing lower tax. I mean, that was why he won, was because he spoke simply and directionally. He wasn't speaking to people in the alt-right. I mean, he was obviously, but yeah, I just think that the minority of people are following this on that intricate of a level.
So you're just kind of assuming that the majority of Trump's base is really only like subsets of the real alt-right that are actually caring about these foreign policy decisions, and the majority of his base are simply grabbing onto the more low-hanging fruit of his campaign.
Well, the majority of his base are barely aware of it, and then the ones that are aware of it, most of them are probably, those guys, they're torturing children, gotta bomb them. And then there are some people who are punched in and woke or high IQ or whatever combination it takes that are looking at it, we have to be careful of the own echo chamber we create when trying to extrapolate it to the population.
I know, that's true.
There's not that many people that are even thinking about these things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know how you're gauging it for sure, though. At the same time,
well, my national perception is based off the fact that this has not been spoken about on Twitter or anything. I mean, it's in our circles it has, but it's not reached the national level. That's the main gauge I have. That's how I follow the news.
That's a good point. Trump's base, this may be completely this may not have any effect whatsoever on his reelection possibilities.
You do have to assume, though, that his base would be the type to heed the words of Carlson, and also be at least somewhat aware of alternative political thought. I'm not necessarily saying the alt-right. I'm just, Alex Jones, these types of people, Freedom Report, or whatever, Freedom Hedge. These websites and people are all unanimously condemning any kind of conflict in Syria.
Right.
And
which is
we're talking about millions and millions of listeners. And they're all pretty much people who voted for Trump, or at least would have if they had voted.
That's an interesting point. A thing that I would like to bring up, that it's nice to see. It's similar to the run-up to the election, that a kind of a unified body of the alt-right and people like Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones and Cernovich and so on, all absolutely opposed to this threatened intervention in Syria. It shows you that in moments of crisis there is a bigger tent,
right?
Of the alt-right spectrum.
Yeah,
and
we can come together around something.
We can come together around something, and probably in the future we can come together around something, when the rubber hits the road in terms of real crisis.
Yeah, I mean, whether it be the imminent day of real dispossession for our race, or just a kind of catastrophic World War III type of event.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, what do you think about that, though? Would a World War III? I mean, especially if it was, by definition, it would have to be obviously, probably the U.S. against Russia and their allies or whatever.
China.
Would that China. Would that have the same effect as some type of Camp of Saints phenomenon, where we're literally just being strangled to death by a wave of that kind of poverty and migration?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine those two things going hand in hand.